What's up, everybody? Welcome into Marketology. I am Drew Martin alongside Joe Lisi. Follow him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. We're doing a little impromptu Marketology. Had some technical difficulties, but nonetheless, we will hopefully get some really good content for you. So, Joe, welcome in. How you doing today, buddy?
Chomping at the bit for week number 1 of the college football season. Futures are out. Week 1 lines are out. Nothing better, Drew.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And, I know you know college football really as good as anybody. The big names in the industry, maybe Kurt Herbstreit, but more from like a betting angle. How much do you concentrate on college football from just a fan perspective and being able to talk about it? And how much do you concentrate on college football from strictly a betting angle, trying to get more winners than losers, Joe?
Yeah, it's a 365-day-a-year journey, Drew. I follow it year-round. In the offseason, I'm breaking down teams from the previous year, looking at tape. So it really is a 365-day journey. On top of being a college football fan, I look for value, not just from the best teams of the nation, but from some of the weaker teams to see where they could possibly be stronger for the upcoming season.
Okay. And do you concentrate maybe say 25% of your time, 50% of your time on actually just strictly the gambling angle?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I give an analysis, I'm looking at it from the Vegas perspective. So if I give an underdog pick, I'm looking for them to win the game outright, but I'm also looking for them to cover the spread from the Vegas angle. Same thing with a favorite. I mean, if you're picking a favorite or picking an underdog and expecting them to win by that margin of spread that Vegas selects, that's not a strong opinion in my opinion. So I look for teams that have value, whether it be a favorite or an underdog. I look for which matchups match up to me in terms of each and every week for the college football season.
Okay. And Joe, we got Underdog in the live chat saying he likes you on the radio and likes listening to your interviews with myself. So thank you, Underdog, for that. And guys in the live chat. Pleasure. Yeah, for sure. It's nice to have some positive vibes here, Underdog. Thank you. And guys, anything you want to hear from Joe or myself on any season win totals for this year or any week 1 lines, we'll see if Joe can give a little opinion. But yeah, Joe, wanted to have you on, go over really what's catching your eye season win total wise with college football. So maybe first and foremost, what do you look for in terms of teams to bet them over a season win total? And also, consequently, what do you look for in teams looking to bet them under the season win total?
Yeah, I think when you look at teams for the over perspective, obviously personnel is a major part, but schedule as well, Drew. Which teams match up from a favorable perspective for their schedules, combined winning percentage of their 2018 opponents, back-to-back road games always factor into for overs for me. And more importantly, the drop-off, especially at the quarterback position. You look at one team in particular, Louisville, that had Heisman Trophy winner Lamar Jackson. He was about 85% of their offense. And now you look at a Louisville team that their win total for 2018 is in the area of 7 wins. So schedule matches up very favorably. So that's what I look at for teams over exceeding expectations. And then the other factor as well for teams on unders is schedule, but more importantly as well, conference games on the road. How do teams fare on the road against the better, stronger teams within the top 25? That's what I look at, and we'll see how it plays out for 2018. But I've had some great success following that type of methodology.
Okay, Joe, and you brought up Louisville, the Cardinals this year. They kind of interesting to look at their schedule. It kind of goes back and forth. They start off with Alabama and playing in the ACC, so not sure if it's an easy schedule, but maybe not too tough a one. Big defensive question marks, and like you said, losing a huge, big-time quarterback. So which way are you looking to bet Louisville this year?
Yeah, this is one of my sleeper teams for 2018 because of the fact of they have one of the most experienced wide receiver cores in the ACC this year. Guys like Jalen Smith, Seth Dawkins, and Des Fitzpatrick that combined for 147 receptions, over 2,300 receiving yards and 20 receiving touchdowns. This is the dynamic wide receiver core of the ACC. And you're talking about a quarterback in Jawan Pass that was a 5-star recruit. He's a big kid, 6'4", goes about 230 pounds, taking over for Lamar Jackson. I think this is going to be a dynamic offense. Let's keep in mind, this is an offense that averaged around 599 total yards per game last year with Lamar Jackson. I think it's a different type of offense in 2018, but expect them to stretch teams vertically. And when you look at their schedule for 2018, not a lot of difficult road games within the conference. I'm picking Louisville at 9-3 for the upcoming year.
Okay, so and how much does that have to do with Bobby Petrino? I mean, think whatever you want from him personally off the field, but his resume says he can coach up some football. So how much does that equate into your season win total over?
It does. It equates in a big factor. The one thing that Bobby Petrino has been able to do in Louisville and everywhere he's been has been able to coach up the offensive side of the ball. Defense over the last couple of years was pretty solid within the ACC under former defensive coordinator Todd Grantham. They lose Jair Alexander. They'll lose a couple of pieces to that puzzle in 2017, but they're going to be a very physical defense that can run sideline to sideline, and they're an athletic team overall. So I think that week one matchup is very intriguing against Alabama. This is an Alabama team that hasn't lost since 2001, a week one matchup. So it'll be very intriguing to see how Louisville stretches that Alabama defense minus Tony Brown and Minkah Fitzpatrick in that week one matchup.
Hey, Joe, do you have your Twitter available with you? Like on your phone or anything?
Yeah, I do. It's Echo for the two.
Yeah, I just sent you a tweet out to get some people to join us because we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. But do you have a chance to retweet that right now? We can get some more people in the live chat.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm doing it right now.
All right. And let me get a question from Teddy B into you, asking me to ask you about the NHL game tonight. Do you have any opinion on the Caps versus the Knights?
Hey, I'm rolling with Vegas. They've been a hot team. They're young. They're hungry. I would take Vegas in tonight's matchup.
Okay. I like it. It's really amazing what they've been able to do there in the NHL. But, hey, let's keep rolling here. We got Stanford. Season win total 9.5, little juice towards the under. I'm using Bet Online. I don't know if you have a different number, Joe, but Bryce Love's returning. We know that they usually have a good offensive line. I've read a little bit. They're a little weak on the defensive front. Not sure if that can hurt them. And Costello at quarterback. What are your thoughts for kind of Stanford Cardinal here? They've been consistent in years past. Are you thinking they'll be consistent this year?
Well, they lost 5 games for the first time since 2014. They lose Harrison Phillips that led that team with total tackles and total sacks. And they do have Costello at quarterback, and he's a more experienced guy. Keller Chris transferred from Stanford. He'll be the starter over at Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt. But I look at this team overall from a schedule perspective, and this is what the first segment, Drew, is that their schedule to start the month of September is vicious for any team. They open up with San Diego State. They lost that matchup 20-17 last year in San Diego. They now face the Aztecs at home with Christian Chapman and Juwan Washington taking over for Rashad Penny. They then follow that up with the game against USC. They then have Oregon, at Notre Dame. They have an FCS opponent and then have to face Utah. For their first 5 of their first 6 games are very difficult for any team. And when you look at the first part of the year, offensive inconsistency, especially on the offensive line and cohesiveness, I think that's going to be a concern for Stanford in their overall Pac-12 schedule this year. I'm picking them at 7-5 overall. I'm not sold on David Shaw and the crew. They lost twice to USC last year. I think it continues. I think they're not a dominant team in the Pac-12. I think they're a middle-of-the-road team, and look for them for a 7-5 2018 season. Okay,
so liking them under the 9.5 win total then, Joe, right?
Under 9.5 for the win total, correct.
Okay, I like it. All right, let's move on. The defending national champions, Alabama Crimson Tide this year. How are you looking to bet them? It's always tricky with a 10.5 win total. You know, it doesn't take a lot to just go 10-2, especially in the sport of college football. And also, any insight on the quarterback issues? Who do you think wins the job this year?
Yeah, well, I think we'll start at the quarterback issue. With Tua, the way he played in the national championship game, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on that offensive staff to go with Tua because of dramatic fashion in beating Georgia in the title game. But Jalen Hurts only lost 2 games as a starter. Here's the thing I look at for Alabama. I picked them at 10-2 in my preview, so I'm favoring an under for the Alabama Crimson Tide. New coordinators, Mike Locksley and co-defensive coordinators on the defensive side of the ball. Both of those guys were on staff. I understand they understand the talent, but when you're a position coach and now have to call a game plan and be the guy to understand how that talent responds in game situations, it is a different animal. These coordinators are like pitchers and quarterbacks. It takes them time to get into a rhythm. And I'll look at this Alabama team from the first half of the year to the second half of the year in 2018. First 8 games of the year, Alabama averaged 298 rushing yards per game. They won those 8 games by 33.3 points per game. In the last 6 games of the year, minus the win against FCS opponent Mercer, this was an offense that only averaged 170 rushing yards per game. They won those 4 games against FBS opponents by 10.5 points per game. Even though they won the national championship, they struggled running the football consistently. They have Najee Harris. They have Damian Harris coming back, but they lose Calvin Ridley. Who's going to be the go-to wide receiver to stretch defenses vertically? We've seen Ruggs. We've seen Jerry Jeudy. They didn't step up last year becoming the go-to guy with Calvin Ridley there. So I think that's going to put pressure on Mike Locksley this year. Even though Alabama has dominated the SEC over the last couple of years, they're 17-1 against SEC opponents and won those games by 26.3 points per game. You look at their November schedule: at LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Even though they got through last year, I think Alabama loses 2 games this season, and don't be shocked if Louisville pushes them to the limit in week number 1 in that ball game.
All right, so you're going with under 10.5 for Alabama?
10-2 overall, under 10.5.
All right, and you can get plus money with that at BetOnline right now, plus 130 on the under Alabama 10.5. It kind of coincides with one question we got here from Underdog. You like Louisville plus 25.5, Joe, week 1 versus Alabama? I'm guessing that's a yes.
Yeah, I do like that Louisville plus 25.5 against Alabama. Like I said, Alabama has won 16 straight week 1 matchups, won by 24.8 points per game. But I think that wide receiver core will be able to stretch that defense vertically. And more importantly, not a lot of game film on Jawan Pass. They do have a lot of defensive talent lost for Alabama, and I think that's a matchup with new coordinators. I think Bobby Petrino, with 6 months of preparation, is a live dog in that ballgame.
Okay, and Joe, talking about some of Nick Saban's disciples here, we got Francisco in the live chat asking, do you think Cristobal at Oregon is a good coach and can keep Oregon at an elite level? Any opinion on that, Joe?
Yeah, I think Cristobal, let's be honest, at FIU, he should have never have gotten fired, even though that team went 3-9 in his last season there. I thought he was fired a little too premature for Ron Turner for Florida International. But I like Mario Cristobal. He's a blue-collar head coach. He's going to bring a physicality on the offensive defensive lines, and that's what Oregon's lacking. I picked them at 8-4 overall. When you look at their strength of schedule for 2018, Drew, their combined winning percentage of their opponents is 463% winning percentage, but against the better teams in the Pac-12, teams like Washington State, they got blown out, and Stanford, they lost those matchups by 31.3 points per game. I think Oregon gets back to a bowl at 8-4 because of Justin Herbert. I just don't think they'll be an elite team within the conference.
Yeah, no, great breakdown there, Joe. And we also got C. White in the live chat. Excellent analysis. Thanks, SBR. Well, thank you, C. White, for watching. And really, it all goes to Joe. We appreciate him coming on. And Joe, to give the people a little shout out for you on Twitter at @GoForThe2, and also your book. You're kind of doing a preview of all the Power 5 teams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a Power 5 preview. It's the strengths and weaknesses of every team statistically in the Power 5 conference. It covers about 90 teams in general. I don't go into the mid-majors too much because really don't have the time to do it. I'm a one-man staff, but I really break down the strengths and weaknesses to see if those trends continue in the early part of the year. If you're looking for a preview that, you know, goes beyond from a schedule perspective, this is not your preview. If you want to see how teams fared against the better teams in their schedule, against the elite opponents within their conference, this is the preview to get, because it really details the strengths and weaknesses, and more importantly, whether those trends will continue in the upcoming year.
All right, good stuff, Joe. And guys in the live chat, feel free to chime in. Any more questions you got, college football season win totals or week one, Joe would be happy to fire away. And please, if you could give us the thumbs up sign, the like button, that would help us out a lot. We'll definitely have Joe on a few more times before college football season starts and also after. He's also a speaker at the IFBC, the International Football Betting Conference, coming up in mid to late August. So excited to see him there. And if you're heading out, make sure to reach out to us both on Twitter and let us know you're coming, and we can get excited to meet you. But anyway, let's keep on going down the line, Joe. We got a little bit of time, about 10 minutes left. Let's talk a little, we just talked Alabama. Let's talk a little War Eagle football. Auburn, we got 8.5 win total, -130 towards the over juice at Bet Online. What are you thinking about the Tigers this year, Joe? And would you lay the 2.5 week one against Washington?
Yeah, great point. And I know you're a former alum, Drew, but I got to call your War Eagle out for Gus Malzahn and the crew. Since 2014, Drew, Auburn's only 11-13 on the road or on a neutral field site. That's a 458 winning percentage. And you look at their 4 losses last year to Clemson, LSU, Georgia, and UCF. They all came on the road or on a neutral field site. So I think the losses of Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway will put a lot of pressure on Cam Martin. In my opinion, I do not feel he's an elite back. This is an offensive line that allowed 36 sacks last year. I think Jarrett Stidham, when you force him to become one-dimensional like Georgia did in the championship game, they're just a pedestrian type of offense. So, again, I look for Auburn right now. I put them in the area 7-5. I think they have a very difficult 2018 schedule. And in that week one matchup against Washington, I think they don't match up very well against Jake Browning and the crew. I like Washington in that matchup. I think the speed of the Huskies on the perimeter will be able to stretch Auburn's defense. They have Myles Gaskin, and they do have the better coach and the better quarterback in Jake Browning. With 6 months of preparation, I'm sorry. I like Washington plus a 2.5 points in that matchup. It'll be the 3rd straight game for Auburn in the Mercedes-Benz Dome. Maybe 3rd time's a charm, but I like the Huskies in that matchup.
Oh, man, I didn't think about that. You're right. Wow, with the SEC Championship, the Chick-fil-A Bowl, they're 0-2, so make it, 0-3? That's a good philosophy there. That's funny. So, yeah, that's an interesting week one matchup. I guess let's move on to another Tigers. Clemson, 10.5, -130 towards the over. How are you looking to bet Clemson this year, Joe?
Yeah, this is the one team I think out of all the favorites that I'm banking on to make the college football playoff. I mean, you can't argue with Dabo Swinney and the crew has done over the last 3 seasons. To think about the type of talent that they've lost on the defensive side of the ball. Guys like Vic Beasley, Mackenzie Alexander, Kevin Dodd, Shaq Lawson, Ben Boulware. I mean, the list goes on. And all this defense did last year was lead FBS in total sacks with 46, hold opposing offenses 27% on 3rd down conversions, and more importantly, only give up 112 rushing yards per game. And they have a more experienced quarterback this year in Kelly Bryant. They're a dual offense. Hunter Renfrow does come back. And more importantly, Clemson over the last 3 years, Drew, on the road or on a neutral field side is 20-3 overall. That's an 869 winning percentage. And let's look at the teams that they defeated last year on the road. Louisville, Va-Tech, NC State, South Carolina, and Miami. They beat those 1.2 points per game. I think Clemson dominates the ACC this year. They get back to the college football playoff for the 4th straight season. They could possibly be the top team in the country because of that front 7 led by
Joe, you got me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. You're breaking up a little bit at the end. And Joe, we're kind of running out of time. 5 minutes left here. Let me get to the chat box. We got plus money saying solid info from Joe always. Hey, Joe, my pops wants Dana Holmgren's head on a platter. What are your WVU chances to top 9 wins this season?
Well, I picked them at 10-2 in the preview, Drew. But when you have Will Grier and you have David Sills, you have an opportunity to really stretch defenses vertically. I think they match up very well week number 1 against Tennessee. The real swing game for West Virginia will be that road trip against Ryan Finley and NC State. That'll be the matchup that really favors whether this is an elite team by Dana Holgorsen. But again, they need a rushing attack. Over the last 8 games of the year with Justin Crawford, they only average about 125 rushing yards per game. They need a better effort to dominate the Big 12. But I did feel that because of Will Grier, they were at 10-2 overall. They could possibly be a sleeper within the conference.
Okay. And Joe, we got an interesting question here from Vitalis saying, I love to focus on horrible colleges. What team is the worst this year coming up in your eyes? Do you have one?
Worst team out of all the Power 5 teams, I think it has to be Illinois. I mean, that's one team under Lovie Smith that has really not lived up to expectations. The one thing overall is that when you see teams like Purdue and Rutgers getting better and Illinois cannot build on their success within the conference of the Big Ten, that's going to be a cause of concern for teams, especially Lovie Smith for 2018. He's my #1 team and coach on the hot seat. They lost Big Ten games last year by 20 points per game. It's not going to get any better in the upcoming year. I think Lovie Smith will be out of Champaign for 2018.
Okay. And Vitalis, if you were concentrating on, let's say, all 130 teams, it's always tough because the Rice, the UTEPs, the Texas States of the world, it becomes very volatile. You know, what teams will have 0 wins, what teams might get to, even 4 or 5 wins. But just kind of shooting to try to answer your question, I'd probably go with UTEP, although they're bringing in a new quarterback, a JUCO transfer that I believe was a former 3 or 4-star quarterback. So if he's a hell of an athlete, they could get a couple wins. But to answer your question, I'd probably go with UTEP. Do you have any opinion on the G5 schools of who's the worst, Joe?
I mean, Rice hasn't looked very well over the last couple of years. They had a lot of young talent last year, and I know that they played better down the stretch. But Rice, again, from a physicality perspective, I just didn't see it out of that team last year. They're going to need to get better and bigger on the offense and defensive line. So I'd be betting against Rice for 2018, even though optimism is high because of the inexperienced players that got to play last season.
Okay. And Joe, Francisco also asking, any early trends you noticed in recent years, such as overs or mid-majors kind of stepping up, I guess having to play a Power 5 team, anything that catches your eye in that regards?
Well, yeah, mid-majors. I mean, when you look at the MAC against the better teams of the Power 5 conferences, I mean, they've fared traditionally well. And when you look at that week 1 matchup, Akron against Nebraska, I think Akron matches up well against Nebraska, even though Scott Frost is there. They're getting 17.5, 18 points lined open up, if I'm not mistaken, in the area of about 13 or 14 and jumped up about 5 points. It's probably over 17.5 in some sports books. Nebraska had the worst rushing offense since prior to the 2008 season, and then one of the worst rushing defenses in Nebraska history. Drew, that's not an easy fix. Even though I think Scott Frost is the right guy for the job, I like Akron plus the points in that week 1 matchup.
Okay. Interesting there. And Joe, we're going to have to end it. I know we had some more teams, but we only have 2 minutes. We got another show, Low Shack in the Bag, coming up. So make sure to tune into that on SBR. But yeah, Joe, we got to get you on in the next couple weeks to finish out the other teams you had an eye on. And also want to get one last thing in here. We got Plus Money saying, great segment as always. Thanks, bro. Akron, 20% at Bookmaker Joe, whatever that is, Underdog. We appreciate you chiming in. Joe, as far as you bring up the Nebraska head coaching gig versus UCF's head coaching gig, in your eyes, what's the better job, UCF or Nebraska?
Right now, I think it's UCF. I mean, you're talking about a UCF school that has an enrollment of 60,000 students. It's the most in the state of Florida. And to think about what Scott Frost did in just 2 seasons, an 0-12 team to an undefeated 13-0 season, at this point, he had them rolling within the state of Florida, I mean, it's a huge hotbed of talent. I would have stayed at UCF, even though he does go back home to a long time since the Cornhuskers have been a formidable Big Ten opponent, or more importantly, Big 8 opponent. It's been a long time since they dominated college football.
I like that you said that, because I thought I was in the minority. I've always thought that UCF was the better job and he should have stayed. I mean, weather, proximity to recruits, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of stuff that you just brought up. So I like having you on my side, even though I'm pretty sure we're in the minority. But Joe, give you a second here. Follow him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. Anything else you want to say about your book real quick?
No, they can follow it on. Pick it up on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. It's there. Go for the 2 Power 5 college football preview.
All right, Joe. Sounds good, man. And for Joe Lisi, I am Drew Martin. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And we'll be back with another Marketology segment, 5 o'clock Eastern next Monday. Thanks for tuning in.